Yo, welcome to my channel, Ward Draws a Lot. Obviously I'm Ward, or I wouldn't have named it Ward Draws a Lot. I was asked by a friend if I could show my Procreate process through a video, and that's what we're going to be doing today. I mostly use Procreate. It's a $10 software on the iPad, and it's a one-time purchase, so yeah. Okay, so now we're going to go into my Procreate app, and of course there's already a bunch of drawings there because I've been using it for a while. We're going to click the little plus sign on the top right. That gives you a lot of canvases that Procreate already default gave you, but I made 4 of them that I mostly use, and they're on the bottom right here. They say YouTube, Instagram, Square, T-shirt, paper, which is what I use to make my t-shirts with, and then I also have the canvas on the bottom, which is what I use regularly for Insta, Twitter, anything. So afterwards you click on the canvas, and then over here in the settings I have it for you if you wanted to know the width and everything. The DPI I put it to 350, so this way the lines aren't jittery when you zoom in, because I know sometimes Procreate does that, weirdly enough, so I highly suggest anywhere over 300 DPI, at least 350 DPI is like my sweet spot. Afterwards, I pick any color that I'm truly feeling that day, and then I go ahead and I make my sketch. I actually have my sketch already ready just to shorten up the video, and also because the video process wasn't recording before, so yeah, there you go. As for brushes, I'm only going to be using the default brushes that Procreate came with. I have a lot of brushes in my set, but they're all genuinely mostly free. I'm gonna say 95% of the brushes were just found online and I downloaded them for free. But I'm using specifically the brushes that you get with Procreate when you download it, so everybody has the feel that they can use the same supplies that I'm using, or supply, I'm not sure. So for this sketch, I used the 6B brush, which is found in the sketching section of the brushes, and that one's available to everybody. I also use it on max size because that's just what I personally prefer. You can use any size or really any brush when you sketch because you're going to line it after anyway. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about my inking process. What I do is I take the sketch and then I lower the opacity. Opacity is how much, I'm going to say, color is there, so you could either put it to where it was, which was its full amount of color, or half the amount of color, or none of the color if you wanted opacity 0. And then from there, I open up a new layer on top of the sketch layer, and then I begin to line it with my studio pen in the inking section of the Procreate brushes. This part is kind of, well, people think it's tedious. I kind of like line art. I don't know why I do, but I do. The thing is with it is that it takes a lot of time because there's no definite way on how to do line art for like tricks or shortcuts or anything. You can like hold down a brush a certain way in Procreate and that could help, but that honestly doesn't really do much whenever you're lining. You just have to follow your lines accordingly and hope that, you know, you get it right. It just comes better over time with practice, so be patient when you're lining. Now I'm going to explain my coloring process. What I do is I take the line art and I make it into a reference layer. So once you tap on that layer, it'll show you on the side this list of what you want to do, which is like clipping mask, combine, any of that stuff. You're going to pick reference on your line art layer. Then you're going to make a new layer under your line art, and then you're going to fill in the spaces with the color that you choose. So here I just made a new layer under the line art. I picked a skin tone. Then with my stylus, I held the color in place and moved back and forth to decide how much of the color I want to kind of come through. Do I want it through the lines, just enough into the lines, stuff like that. So it fills it in accordance to how much you want it, almost like a paint bucket tool, but you get to choose how far out it goes into the spots that you want it to. I also changed the background color, so when I'm coloring I could see what's missing from where I want to put it down, and you could choose any color you want for the background color. Honestly, it's up to you. I also repeat the process that I did before, which was creating a new layer under the line art and then filling it out the spaces where I wanted. So I did a new layer for the hair, a new layer for the eyes, a new layer for the mouth, and a new layer for the earring. I keep everything on its own layer because that's how I personally like it. It's more organized and easier to see and take care of each thing one at a time. I also use different techniques. So for like the whites of the eyes and the teeth, I alpha lock the layer. That's when you tap the layer and on the right it gives you, or I mean the left, it gives you a bunch of different things that you could do, kind of like before with the reference layer. You press alpha lock and then you take any color you want, like I took a gray so I could give it some shading, and you color within that layer and nothing will come out further than in that layer. So basically the coloring doesn't bleed through onto anything else or any other layer. There are also a bunch of Procreate like tutorials on how that kind of stuff works and are much better at explaining them than I am. I'm just showing you how I kind of draw in this program. I'm just going off of the assumption that you kind of know how to use it already, but you're just looking for how someone else's process is done. Okay, so back to the drawing. What I also use is a technique called the clipping mask, where I make a layer above the layer that I have already colored in. So like here's the mouth I already colored in. I make a new layer on top of it and I set it to clipping mask, which is when you tap it or tap the layer, and on the left it'll give you all those commands again and you'll just clip or click clipping mask. Then you can take any color you want. I personally use a purple and I shade it in on top of that layer, and I know that looks weird, but you're going to take that and you're going to set that layer to multiply, which is where the N on the layer would be, and then you would take the opacity and you would set it to wherever you want. So wherever you feel the color is looking correctly or how it looks correctly on that layer is where you would set it to. For the eyes, I kind of did the same thing where I made the clipping mask over the layer that already has the color, but instead of using a purple for the eyes, I personally like to take darker colors than the original color that was already there. So I had like a light brown, and I go over it 3 or 4 more times with a darker brown, kind of creating a gradient for the eyes so it looks like it has a little bit more depth than just this one color. Also, I forgot to mention that at this point I'm using the soft airbrush within the airbrush pack here in the Procreate program. It comes with the program as well, so you don't have to worry about finding or getting that brush anywhere than you need to. Here I'm showing you that if you open up the clipping mask layer and you don't set it to clipping mask, what happens is that it kind of shows up as a mess around the eyes instead of something that looks nice and proper, so you want to make sure you keep it clipped. And then I do the same thing for every other layer. I just add my colors in accordance to how I feel it looks right, and I either use darker versions of that color or I kind of mess around with the gradients. Really, there's nothing specific that I do for that part except just using more color. It's kind of like layering something on top of another color when you're using markers. So there's that. Okay, for the skin tone, I wanted to take a little bit of time on it. I'm going to open it up, create a clipping mask like I did before for the other layers, and choose a purple color to do the skin tone on. Again, it's going to look a little weird because it's a really bright purple on skin, but like before, when we used that purple and we set it to multiply, it completely changed the way that purple looked on the skin. I'm still using the airbrush here, but depending on the size of the airbrush, you either get a really nice crisp line, which you could see from where the neck is all the way down to the shoulder, or if you make the brush bigger, it looks a little bit more soft or faded out, so you could do softer shadows compared to darker shadows. Learning shadows in general is going to take some time. You could place them anywhere, but it won't look right. I'm still personally learning shadows, but I have somewhat of an idea of where they kind of go. Like if a character is looking a certain way, you'd know that there would be a shadow under their chin and all that kind of stuff. So I suggest you practice a little bit with shadowing just to kind of learn how a shadow would look in a certain area. So like for the other side of the neck, I'm doing a softer shadow. One side, it's a hard shadow. In other words, a softer line and a harder line. And then I also add that same shadow to certain places like under the nose or around the eyelids, where the hair would be away from the face. Because if something is on top of your face, it would leave a shadow on it. I also put shadow lines around there too. Yeah, basically wherever I just feel that the shadows are needed for the drawing. So after I'm happy with my shadows, I'm going to go back to that layer that has the shadows on them, which is that clipping mask layer. I'm going to set it to multiply, and I'm going to reduce the opacity so it looks like it's shadow instead of this really dark purple, weird looking harsh color on the skin. So now it looks like there's actually shadow being cast. I set it to around 35. Usually anywhere between 30 and 50 is my sweet spot, depending on the skin tone and depending on just how I feel. I want the shadow to look a little darker, lighter, etc. So this is just for like the base of everything. You don't have to continue further here if you don't want to, but I like to add little extras. So what I'm going to do from here on is I'm going to add some blush to his cheeks using the clipping mask method. On top of that, I'm also going to be adding some highlights and some freckles in certain places just to give him a little bit more character. Whenever I do something like freckles, it's just the same thing. I open up a new mask and then I add whatever I want to. The highlights, I go all the way to the top above the line art, and then I do a really white highlight, and I do it on the eyes, on the cheek, lips, on anything that's like a gold piece like I have his earring, or anywhere else I see fit. I just put a regular circle on the background, which is all the way under all the other layers, so it doesn't get in the way of anything. Now once you're done, you're going to go into that wrench in the top left corner, and you're going to make it a PNG in the share section, and then it should be in your photos right after. So here he is done with the entire process. I hope that was helpful for you, and yeah, thanks for watching, and remember, I love you. Bye.